Good morning, welcome to UK Column Live. I'm your host this morning, Brian Gerrish, and we're reporting to you from sunny Plymouth, England. This is a really extraordinary event that we've got sunshine outside, so I've decided to dispense with the tie and deliver a fairly relaxed programme this morning. Because of events that have happened over the last couple of weeks, we've decided that this morning we're going to focus the whole of our programme today on what's been happening in the courts, and in particular we've got a guest today, which is Roger Hayes, the chairman of the British Constitution Group. Roger will be telling his own story, having been arrested and imprisoned in a remarkable series of events. But what that whole case has highlighted is that here we are in Britain in 2012, and people can now be arrested in the morning on the streets, picked up by the police, and a few hours later they are in prison, having never been put in front of a jury. But you will be able to hear Roger giving a full account of what has happened to him and how he got on shortly. The other person that we'll mention in the programme is a very brave Royal Marine, ex-Royal Marine, Mike Harvey. Mike Harvey is another one of the good people of this country who's been working very hard over the past few months in order to highlight the abuses against our system of common law and fair trial and justice within the court system. And his reward for his hard work and bravery in speaking out was to be sentenced to 8 weeks in prison. That was in Exeter Court on Friday. And as is usual in these cases, again, this was a decision made simply by the judge with no jury present in the case whatsoever. So I want to also give Mike Harvey a special mention in the programme, because this is a man who has been overseas fighting for his country and taking those sorts of risks, and the country repays him by putting him in front of a single judge, who then sentences him to 8 weeks in prison. Before we introduce Roger Hayes, I would just like to give a special thanks to all the people who helped arrange our event on Saturday, just gone, in Dunstable. This was a combined event between the UK column and the Sovereign Independent team in UK. And we mixed speakers with music. We had a very good response from the people who had attended. The whole aim of the conference was again to talk about what was happening inside Britain and how we are seeing a very slow but deliberate slide into a dictatorship. But a very, very enjoyable event. People left the venue, I think, in an upbeat mood. They knew what they had to do. And we will certainly be repeating this. So thank you to all those people who helped set it up and all those who came along. Okay, so we'll just see whether we've got Roger Hayes on the phone. Good morning, Roger. Are you there? We seem to have lost Roger Hayes. Just yes. Good morning, Roger. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but we've got you back again.
All right, good morning.
Okay, Roger, you're now live on UK Column Live. So it's great to speak to you. I know that you were only released from prison on Friday. So what I'd like to do is just say to you, could you just give our viewers and listeners a brief introduction to yourself and the work you've been doing as chairman of the British Constitution Group? And then really we've got an opportunity for you to explain to people what actually happened and the significance, because I think what we're starting to see is a very dangerous slide into a situation where we don't have proper courts anymore. So just tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you've been doing.
Well, okay. 60-second overview of 40 years of observing what's been going on. Okay.
That's fine.
Right. Well, I suppose the basic principle is that most of us, or not most of us, at least the group that we work with, have observed the fact that our nation our nation's been transferred to foreign power, and this is just part of a wider and bigger agenda to create one world governance. And part of that process is that they have introduced star chamber courts, which are, of course, unlawful in this country, according to our common law rights, the Bill of Rights, etc. I have experienced them firsthand. And what happened to me just recently, 20 odd days ago, was an exact replica of the star chamber courts that people in this country fought to remove. So that's what's happening. That's what's sort of going on. And I think that people need to start waking up to the reality of the situation, that it's not going to get any better, it's going to get a lot worse.
Yes. Well, I'll just add to that, if I may, that on Saturday, as I've just mentioned, we did an event in Dunstable, and as part of my own talk, I actually spelled out that we're now seeing, this is not an accidental situation with a few cases, we're now seeing a stream of individuals put through courts with no juries. So I was delighted to be able to mention both Rusty and Malcolm, who were two of the brave guys that took part in the arrest of the judge in Birkenhead, but of course subsequently imprisoned. Then we've had yourself, and now on the day you were let out, we've also seen Mike Harvey sentenced to prison without any form of a jury. So if I just get you to go back a bit, what was the start of the whole incident? What caused you to actually be arrested?
Well, obviously, historically, for the last 5 years, I've not paid my council tax because the process is unlawful. And over the past several years, I have been into one court after the other, trying to get any judge, to actually take notice of the process that's been going on, which is unlawful and provably so. We arrested Judge Peake because he had quite deliberately, in front of 30 witnesses, when evidence was pushed in front of him, he pushed it back away and said, "That's your problem," and refused point blank to actually look at evidence proving that the actual council tax was unlawful. So wind the clock forward 5 years, and we now have a situation where the council tax have gone through the process of trying to bankrupt me. They've been trying to do everything possible, but I've been not responding and fighting back. The last thing they could do, they had an ex parte hearing, which means that I wasn't invited, I had no representation in that courtroom, and they called for me to be incarcerated. So that's the first process. I knew nothing of it. The next thing, 7:30 in the morning, 3 constables to arrest me, and I was taken to a magistrate's court where the whole process was an absolute farce. No representation, no opportunity to put a point across. There was no evidence, there were no witnesses on oath, and within 5 minutes, the judge has determined that I should go to prison for 21 days. Of course, what's really happening is this is a predetermined outcome. It's designed to make an example of me, an example to everyone else, is this is what the state will do to keep control of us. So the courts now are not delivering justice. They are tools of oppression. They are designed to control us, not deliver justice.
Okay. Now we've got a pretty good reception on the phone, Roger. But just so that we're getting this over very clearly to viewers and listeners, there's 2 court cases that took place, and in the first court case, you are saying that you were not informed.
It was an ex parte. The council applied for an ex parte decision, ex parte hearing, and the decision was given to them. And the issue, and this is a very important point, we're talking about an application to a court, which is supposed to be a neutral body, right? An application to this court to put someone in prison based on a claim they've made. Now, if they have a claim, they will have evidence, they will have witnesses to be able to prove the case. If you don't have anybody representing the accused party, then how it's possible for them to have a fair hearing? How is that possible? It's not, of course. designed to be fair. What it's designed to do is to teach us a lesson. Step out of line, and this is what we'll do.
Okay.
So that was the first hearing.
Okay, so if we just tease out the facts around this case, so the council called for this this hearing. You were not informed of it, so therefore you didn't turn up.
So it's a secret hearing, isn't it?
Yes. What was the actual result of that hearing? What judgment?
Obviously, I found out on 7:30 on Monday the 2nd that the outcome must have been that the judge, whoever it was, and I imagine it must have been Abelson, because this judge is inclined to support anything the council wants. He doesn't listen to evidence. He just does what the council demand of him. So he has obviously determined that yes, I should be incarcerated, and 7:30 in the morning, that was the action that they took to get me into a magistrate's court to actually put me inside.
Right. So at the first hearing, if we just concentrate on the first hearing, am I correct in saying that judge issued a bench warrant for your arrest?
Apparently, then of course it's questionable as to whether there was a valid bench warrant. We think it was just, well, I won't say signed by a judge, but it certainly wasn't stamped by a court or anything else. But
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so a hearing takes place. You are not informed, so obviously you don't turn up, and in your absence, a warrant for your arrest is issued. And just so that we've got the dates clear, the first case was on the 2nd of July, is that correct?
Yeah, well, I think at that first hearing, the judge must have decided that yes, I should be incarcerated, and in order to carry out that process, they must have then had a second hearing.
Okay. So you were arrested on the Friday. Can you remind us of that date?
That was on the Monday. I was arrested on Monday the 2nd of July.
Yes.
3 constables turned up. One of them said he had a warrant for my arrest. I said, I'm not going to go through the issue of the legal fiction or anything at this point in time, because a lot of your listeners may not understand the full significance of who the arrest warrant was against. But I challenged the constable on the validity of the warrant. I said that first and foremost, we need to know who the judge is on the warrant, no anonymous squiggles. We need to have a court stamp and so on and so forth. And of course, I believe that the routine is that you need more than one signature to incarcerate somebody. So the warrant that the constable put forward to me, he didn't give me a copy. He just had a piece of paper himself. I said, that is not a valid warrant. And I said, do you know what a valid warrant is? They don't know. The police are now policing through sheer ignorance. They no longer understand what a warrant is. And of course, that's been deliberately planned. If the police don't know what warrants are, they can't say yay or nay. So in me challenging the validity of the warrant, I'm dealing with someone who actually does not understand what a warrant actually is. But our claim is that they need to be an identified judge, not just a squiggle. And this piece of paper literally was the words a warrant and on it a squiggle. We don't know whether it's a judge or the cleaner from the court. There's no stamp, so we don't even know that it's been produced by the court. And what we do understand is a lot of this documentation is not actually being produced by the court anyway. It's being produced by the council.
Yes.
So we have a situation where probably and possibly the council has issued the warrant and there's a squiggle on it which may or may not be a judge, we don't know. But the point is we are entitled to be able to validate these claims and validate these warrants to make sure that everything is lawful. Our position is they're not lawful.
Well, yeah, this of course is a very important point that you're raising, because we in the last few weeks we have irrefutable evidence of councils hiring courts in order to take action against, hiring the court, hiring the magistrate in order to take action against people who haven't paid their council tax.
But worse than that, they're not just hiring the halls, they're actually producing their own summonses.
Yes.
And the point is that for expediency, the councils are producing the summonses, and whereas normally the process, the due process should be that they should lay a complaint, then the court should issue the summons, and on judgment, the court would then issue a liability order. But right that the process the council and the courts must go through is lay the complaint, issue the summons, and if the hearing is found in favour of the plaintiff, then there would be a liability order. We have a situation now where there is no laying of the complaint. Thereafter, everything is a denial of due process and it's all void. But we then have the council that's issuing its own summons, and lo and behold, having paid the court for the use of, the court is then not even issuing liability orders, the council is. So the whole process is completely unlawful, and that's what I've been challenging. And where I've gone to court and actually put this evidence, irrefutable evidence, in front of the courts, they're not minded to take any notice whatsoever because the outcome is predetermined. It's about control, not about justice.
Right, and of course, any court that you're taking the evidence into to date is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that any of the courts that you've taken evidence into to date is always a court with simply a judge sitting. There's been no jury.
Chambers, that's right.
Yeah, there's been no jury. Yeah.
And what's more, what is interesting is that there has been an agreement between the executive, i.e. the government, and the judiciary that they should slowly start to introduce Star Chambers courts, although they're calling them statute courts. Nevertheless, if there is a single judge on the bench, those courts are not courts. They are Star Chambers, and they are unlawful. They're against our Constitution. They're against the Bill of Rights that we have fought to make sure that we do not get these Star Chamber courts. Now, the only occasion where any of these so-called Star Chamber courts could have any authority is if we as individuals consented to arbitration by an individual between two parties. So if the council asked whether I would be prepared to have a judge arbitrate in a particular matter, then I could consent to doing that. And of course, what they're doing is they're presuming our consent. And that is where we're getting judgment by presumption and not judgment by law. So we've reached a point where we no longer have the rule of law, we now have the rule of force. And rule of force is being imposed upon us against our will without our consent. It's entirely unlawful. And we have to stop these people doing this because, as I said before, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets a lot better. And they're now committed to this path. They're now committed to the oppression they decided that they're going to force upon us.
Right. And if we take this full circle for viewers and listeners this morning, of course, the British Constitution Group and other groups, because there have been many good people who've been warning for, 50 years, more than 50 years, but certainly if we say over the last 20 years, we've had very dedicated groups who've been holding up their hand and saying we need to wake up because we are seeing very, very devious political attacks on our constitution, which is ultimately going to strip away freedoms and rights. And having picked up on that as the chairman of the British Constitution Group, where people have been looking at documentary evidence, of course, what you've now experienced personally is the fact that what people have believed from documentary evidence is now being proved absolutely 100% factually correct in practice, in that we are now seeing common law completely flouted and these secret courts imposed upon us.
Yeah, we're getting judges who are actually saying in the courts, we won't have any of that common law in these courts, and also, importantly, they are quite categorically ignoring habeas corpus. So whereas the law of the land is that no man should be imprisoned without judgment of his peers, their attitude is, well, we're not taking any notice of that because it's inconvenient. So we've got a line in the sand, and the line in the sand is simply that they are not prepared to take on board our Constitution, Magna Carta, Bill of Rights, habeas corpus, all of those which defend and protect our freedoms and liberties in this country. Our own judiciary are turned their back on those protections because it's convenient for them because their agenda is an agenda of control, and that the extension of that, of course, it's an agenda of oppression. And the one that's the frightening thing, is that they hide behind a veneer of legitimacy because mostly the courts are dealing with petty crime and misdemeanors. And whilst those courts, the lower courts, function quite admirably in that sense, when you actually go to those courts to look for them to deal with more serious issues such as corruption of politics, corruption of the judiciary itself, they are failing dramatically. I mean, the failure of the courts at that level is what the problem is. We can't get justice in our courts. That's the problem.
Right. I'm keeping an eye on the time, Roger. We've got 9 minutes left, and as I said, I'd like just a few minutes at the end of the programme to mention Mike Harvey. Picking up on how this process is going through the courts, the fact that we are just seeing court officials simply denying the power and right of common law. John Hurst, who has been working over the last few days, well, while you've been in prison, has been working to try and get you out, told us a few days ago that he had been absolutely staggered that the senior clerk of Wirral Magistrates Court, I believe that's a Mr. Bettinson, had said in front of witnesses that there was no place for common law in the Magistrates Court.
Oh, the gentleman you refer to is Norman Draper, and we have heard him say, he said it right in front of me, I was standing there, statute laws are superior to common law. And that's a complete 180-degree switch on the reality, because, of course, statutes of Act of Westminster back in 1200 was actually introduced to codify common law. So statute law is most definitely inferior to common law, but these people are now trying to push through the propaganda that statute law can oppress common law, and of course out the window go all of our rights. But the point about Norman Draper is that he is a block. If you go to put a summons in, I've tried to put a summons in against a corrupt judge, and he has blocked it, and he just simply says, no, I'm not going to take this on board, I'm not going to put this through the court. So they're ring-fencing their own corruption, aren't they?
Yes, and of course we need to highlight that this attack on common law and true justice in the court is actually treasonous. So what we are starting to see is individuals within the judicial system are now actively conducting treason in their attack on our constitution and common law.
Yeah, what we've got, the thing is, which is quite frightening, we've just had this recent Queen's Jubilee, and everybody's celebrating, X number of years of the monarch on the throne. But what people don't seem to appreciate fully is the Queen has been deposed. She is no longer the sovereign that she was when she was crowned in 1953. Her predicament has changed, and she has not responded in the way that she should have done to actually protect our constitution and the rule of law. Now, whether she's under duress or not, I don't know. I wouldn't like to speculate. But what I certainly do know is that the political elites in this country have actually hijacked the royal assent, and they're taking upon themselves to lord it over our own sovereign state. So yes. This is the position that we're in now.
Okay. Now just give us just a couple of minutes, literally a minute or a minute and a half. Just tell us, how did you find the process of being arrested and then subsequently being in prison? Were people sympathetic, or were they hostile to you?
Well, starting from the very beginning, the police themselves, the police were admirable in their attitude. They didn't handcuff me. They were polite. They were courteous. They're just doing a job, and that's the scary bit. This is where we need to educate the police. They shouldn't just be responding to the courts. When I got to the court, the people in the court know me. They call me Roger. They're polite. They're courteous. They just go through the routine, what they have to do. So they put handcuffs on me and blah, 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 the usual process. But what we're looking at is everybody who's engaged in the process won't actually do anything about it. They're a bit like sheep. They'll just, follow the agenda which they think is right because they've not been educated to the reality or to the truth of the matter. Also, when you go through to the prison system, everyone is just doing a job. I refuse to consent in the prison. I refuse to give my name. I refuse to sign anything, and so on and so forth. We went on a hunger strike, and one of the officers came to see me, or the senior officer came to see me. He said, "Look, it's not us that's got you in prison. We're just, doing a job." And I said, "Well, if you're implying it's not your fault, I disagree, because you have an obligation. You have a duty of care to me to ensure that what you are doing is lawful. And I'm telling you categorically, you are breaking the law. You do not have me here on a lawful warrant. It is unlawful, and you need to actually check this out." And of course, the thing is that they may hear what you say, but they're not listening to what you're saying.
Yes.
And I think the problem that we've got. These people have got to move beyond the old Nuremberg mentality, which is I was just doing a job just following orders. They need to start thinking for themselves and checking what it is they are doing.
Right. That's a very, very important comment, I think, Roger, because yes, we are seeing now that there are quite senior civil servants and public officials who are definitely listening and paying attention to what the British Constitution Group or the UK Column or other groups who are speaking out and warning of this massive attack on our civil liberties. But the time's really come for people to act. Now, something I'd like to just ask you is that surprisingly, that whilst you were in prison, there were a number of individuals and even some groups who were attacking you and what you've been doing. What would you say to people who would attempt to criticise you? What they're saying is effectively, well, anybody who doesn't pay their council tax deserves to be locked up. What would you say to that?
Well, I think the point is that this is the mentality of a lot of people, is that we have to pay our taxes, we have to pay our council tax, etc. Well, that of course is the brainwash mentality, because their assumption is that tax is lawful. And my point has always been, I am more than happy to make a fair and lawful contribution to the running of society. But what makes them think that this money is being used to run the society lawfully? And the point is, of course, it isn't. This is corruption in the system, and our money is not being used for our services. And it's the corruption that we've uncovered that we're trying to expose. And when people say to me, we have to pay our taxes, I say, fine, as long as it's lawful. And that's always been my claim. And my point has been this, that I'm prepared to go into court and prove my case. The problem, of course, is the courts won't allow me to do so. They shout me down. They won't listen to what we've got to say. They won't study the evidence. And the reason they won't do that, of course, is because they know we're right and they know we're wrong. And ultimately, to shut me up, they thought they'd put me in prison, and that should intimidate me sufficiently to keep me quiet. Guess what? It ain't going to work.
Okay, so just a final couple of sentences to end on. Roger, you've had this experience. What is your plan now? What are you going to do?
Well, it's brought strength to my elbow. I'm more determined than ever. I want to say something. The support, the letters, the cards I've had in prison, and the general sort of good wishes from around the community also in the prison, I want to thank people for that, because obviously it has inspired me to go on and fight further. I think we're on the cusp now where this thing is swinging in our favour. It isn't going to go away. They have to submit to the authority of the people, and if they're not going to do so, then some of these people are going to end up in prison themselves for a long, long time. So my sort of comment to people out there is we need to stand up, move forward, strengthen our resolve, and one day we will have this thing boxed off.
Okay. Roger, thank you very much for talking to us. Of course, we intend to do an in-depth look at what's happened to you, so you'll have opportunity to speak again. But I'm going to thank you for joining us this morning. Good luck, and we'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, my pleasure, and thank you, Brian.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye now. Well, there you have it. That's Mr. Hayes giving his experiences of being arrested and put through a secret court. And of course we should set this against the background that we live in Britain today, where our government under Mr. Cameron, but it's been exactly the same under Tony Blair and Brown, and it would be, I'm sure, under Miliband, where we stand on a world platform and talk about democracy and human rights in other countries, and at the same time as this hypocrisy goes on, we are locking people up in Britain with no proper judicial process at all. And I think, seen against the background of the rhetoric for war, which has been coming out of David Cameron and the Conservative Party over the last few months, war against Syria, and the increasing rhetoric against Iran, we are seeing some very, very dangerous individuals in power in Britain today. On the subject of war, of course, wherever there's the conflict abroad, we are putting our own young men and women straight into the firing line, whether it's been through Iraq or more recently through Afghanistan. And at this point, I would like to come back to the subject of Mike Harvey, and I think we should have a picture of him to show you. So here is Mike Harvey in full ceremonial dress for the Royal Marines. This man has served his country for 17 years. He's been put in positions of real danger, fighting overseas for Britain in Afghanistan. And having recently been invalided out of the Royal Marines, Mike Harvey's reward for service in his country is to be sentenced to 8 weeks in prison, not by a jury, but again by a single judge, a rather eminent judge, Judge Gray. You may like to look him up on the internet yourself. So what was the heinous crime that this very brave Royal Marine has committed? Well, the answer is that he dared to leave a birthday card and a gift for his sons on the doorstep of his estranged wife's home, and he dared to open her car door in order to give his 2 sons Easter eggs. And as a result of those 2 actions, his wife went to the police. She claimed that these actions had intimidated and frightened her, and therefore it amounted to harassment. And as a result of that, Judge Gray saw fit to sentence Mike Harvey to 8 weeks in prison. Of course, we would like to emphasize that this was once again a court with no jury, so the only person making the decision was Judge Gray. Not surprisingly, I think that when the decision was passed, the judgment was passed, there was uproar in the court, with members of the public shouting out that it was a disgrace and asking what had happened to due process. But here we have yet another example that people in Britain in 2012 can simply be imprisoned on the word of one single judge. And what is quite remarkable in this case is that, and I probably need to put my glasses on to find this, but the police officer, PC Morgan, who I believe is currently stationed at Torquay Police Station, led the investigation into the harassment of the birthday card and the chocolate Easter eggs, but this gentleman didn't see fit to turn up at court, even though he was a witness. And what is very, very interesting is that Judge Gray did not see fit to halt the court proceedings to ensure that all the witnesses were fully present. So we're waiting to learn more details about this case. But I think the fact that we have had a young man who, as I say, has fought for his country, he's been out there in the field with his colleagues, facing death for Britain, and his reward is to be put through an utterly corrupt court in full breach of our common law. At the moment, we don't know what action, if any, local MPs have taken. We can tell viewers that some MPs have finally started to wake up, and I can tell viewers that some MPs have told us that they are having trouble getting their colleagues in Westminster to understand the gravity of the situation in Britain today, because MPs are themselves frightened of the power of the judiciary in this country. So this is quite an extraordinary situation where judges are claiming power for themselves. Okay, now we will pass more information to viewers on Mike Harvey, and we'll be doing more on his particular case and Roger's case later in the week. But we will make every effort to put out details so that if you'd like to write to him and send him letters of support, you know where to send those letters. I'd like to end today's programme, I know we've run over time a little bit, by giving an advance notice that on Wednesday, coming Wednesday, at the Holiday Inn, Camden Lock in London, that's Northwest 1 7BY, 7:30 in the evening, Ian Crane is going to be running an event called The Perfect Storm, in which he's going to be looking in detail at what's happening around the London Olympics, and in particular, with the help of the G4S whistleblower Ben Fellows, he's going to be looking in depth at the real implications of the absolutely chaotic arrangements over security and the reasons why we are seeing the British government planning an Olympic event to fail. So if you want more detail about that, or you'd like to attend, visit Ian's website, which is www.ianrcrane.com. Okay, thank you very much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow at 12 o'clock. Goodbye from me.